Hi, hello, and welcome. Thank you for coming to Queens Storytellers Online. My name's Dominic D'Andrea. I'm the Director of Community Engagement at Queens Theatre. And from wherever you are, we hope that you are happy, that you are healthy, that your loved ones are safe, that you have everything that you need. We've been really examining what it means to gather and create audience and maintain our community and grow our community during this time of COVID, and we have been running digital programming in all sorts of capacities at Queens Theatre for the last 6 weeks. And tonight, we are wrapping up the final performance of this round of Queens Storytellers Online. Queens Storyteller Show at Queens Theatre was the first thing that got canceled when we all had to cancel our season and shelter in place, and we were so happy to be able to bring it back in this digital space and to welcome back my friend and collaborator, David Lawson, to help lead his cohort of amazing storytellers to guide them through this beautiful online performance tonight. Please check our hashtags QT Makes, QT at Home, and QT Community for all the online content related to our events, both past and upcoming. You can visit our website at Queens Theatre to find out everything that's going to be happening going forward. We're ending the round of all kinds of programming right now, and then in the next month, a whole slew of new things will pop up, and so we'll be excited to announce and welcome those artists and those programming to Queens Theatre going forward. But this has been a great 6 weeks. We are so thrilled to be able to welcome people tonight on this new platform that is not Zoom that we are trying out. So hopefully everything goes to plan and that what you're seeing right now on your Facebook Live looks really, really cool, thanks to Jay Rogers. But without any further ado, I would like to introduce to the screen, I guess camera, I don't know how we do it in this platform, David Lawson. David.
Thank you so much, Dominic D'Andrea. I am David Lawson, as Dominic just said. I'm gonna be your host tonight for Queens Storytellers Online. We have some wonderful performers for you tonight, telling some really great stories. So let's dive right into that first performer tonight. Our first performer tonight is the New York Times best-selling author of Burn Down the Ground, a memoir. She has performed on the popular storytelling podcasts, The Moth Radio Hour and Risk. She is the owner and operator of QED, a wonderful venue here in Astoria, Queens, where I am right now, that's actually doing some online programming right now, similar to the show you're watching right now. So check them out at QEDAstoria.com. Our first performer tonight, please welcome Cambrie Cruz.
Hey! Hi everyone. Yes, I am Cambrie, and I am coming to you from a cabin in the woods, which sounds really remote and cozy, and it is, but it's actually pretty much the way I grew up, except this is actually really modern because I have a toilet that flushes. Yeah, when I was a kid, we had no plumbing, no running water, and no electricity, and we lived in a one-room tin shed. We did get a trailer. The trailer got repossessed and we moved back into the tin shed. So yeah, this Jetson futuristic stuff we're doing now, I could live like this forever. This is great. But living in the woods was pretty isolating, more so than anything that we're doing right now. It was very isolating, and on top of it, my parents were deaf. My brother can hear, but my parents are deaf, and my grandparents are deaf, my aunts and uncles, almost everyone in my family was deaf. And that was further isolating. And just before I get into my story, I know that telling you my whole family is deaf prompts a lot of questions. So I'm going to go ahead and answer the top 3 FAQs so we can all stop thinking about them and get that out of the way. Okay. So number 1, yes, I know sign language. Number 2, I know how to talk because I'm not deaf. And 3, no, I don't know Braille. Had no occasion ever to read Braille. Yeah. Another one that I would get also is, oh, your whole family is deaf, even your mama? Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, bless your heart. I'm like, sorry? I said they were deaf, not dead. Okay, think about it for a second. You're a kid. Your parents don't know what you're doing. What's wrong? I don't know. Nothing's wrong. I mean, growing up, we could do whatever we wanted. We were as loud as we wanted, listening to any kind of music we wanted, as late as we wanted, sneaking out, walking out the front door. Bye, Mom. Bye, Dad. See ya. Well, sneaking back in just as easy. As long as we didn't shake the trailer, they had no idea. And the trailer was, like I said, deep woods of Texas, like snake infested forest. And then on top of it, my parents, they worked in Houston, which was like an hour and a half each direction commute. And they worked about 80 hours a week each, just crazy amounts of overtime. So they left us alone in the woods, completely on our own. And so the summer times devolved into something like a Southern fried Lord of the Flies. It was kill or be killed, every kid for himself, and my brother was king of Montgomery, fearless and feared, and our trailer was understandably the place to hang out. So my brother is about 4 or 5 years older than me, 4 years. And so all his friends were much older than I was, and they were always hanging out in the living room, smoking pot, hanging out, listening to heavy metal, go out, kill some snakes, country kid stuff. And they were always very nice to me, and they would always offer me, if Cambrie, hey, do you want a hit? You want some pot? And I'm like, no, thank you. I have inventory. See, I had turned my bedroom into a fully functional library, complete with the Dewey Decimal System. So yeah, I was busy. I had no time for your marijuana cigarettes. But then the summer that I turned 13, I go into the living room. I smell pot, of course, but there was something different. There was a girl sitting on my couch between my brother and his friend, and she was smoking pot with them. But what's crazy is she was my age. She was about 13. Her name was Maria, and she had just moved to the road that we lived on, which was called Boar's Head, because, country. And I say down the street, she lived down the street. That was like a mile down the road, but in country terms, that's close enough. And she was 13, but she was smoking pot with my brother. And so when she offered me a hit off the marijuana cigarette, of course I said yes. I mean, this girl, she was so exotic looking. She had like like a super pitch black Joan Jett type mullet and kohl rimmed eyes. I mean, she looked like a little badass. So of course I wanted to get high with her. So we get high, and then of course we get the munchies, and she's like, hey, I'm hungry. Let's go get something to eat. You want to go with me to Webb's grocery? Well, sure, but that's like 4.5 miles one direction. Like, how are we going to get there? And she's like, on my horse, doy. Whoa, what? The girl had what? I look out the front window, and their liberation from this isolated shack in the woods is tied to a tree, and his name was Star. He was an Arabian horse, and we hopped on his back, and we just went to Webb's grocery. This was revolutionary. And along the way, she pulls out a pack of cigarettes and Marlboro 100s, and she asks me if I want one. So of course I said yes. And so I start smoking a cigarette. She teaches me how. I get a head rush. She's like, cool, right? I'm like, yeah, cool. So we get to Webb's grocery. We tie Star to a bumper, and we go inside, and I get a bottle of Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill. Now, Mr. Webb had been selling me 6 packs of Coors Light and Cools for years while my dad sat in his Chevy pickup truck with the engine idling, and I'd go in and get his booze and his cigs and go back out. I don't know why it didn't click to Mr. Webb that, hey, a grown man is switching brands from Coors Light to Boone's Farm, but he's like, here you go, little lady. And so we hop back on Star, and we head the 4.5 miles back to the trailer. So I am now smoking pot, and drinking. This is the best hour of my life. 1 hour after meeting this chick, I'm doing all this stuff. And we did this every single day, all summer long. It was the best summer ever. But after a while, Maria's dad started to get upset. Not about the pot, not about the smoking, not about the Boone's Farm, but about Star. We were breaking that poor horse's back. I was a big girl. I mean, she was like 5'2", came up to my armpit. But the two of us on Star's back, we were breaking that poor horse's back. He's like, Cambrie, if you want to keep doing this, you're going to have to get a horse of your own. oh, that's a great idea. I'm going to go get a horse. So I pitched my parents the idea. I'm like, okay, Mom, I had my whole speech. I am a straight A student. I have 2 jobs. I worked as a busboy at Walden Yacht Club, and I sold fireworks on the side of the road in a fireworks shed. Yeah, 13-year-old smoking behind a fireworks shed, 5 tons of explosives. But hey, I'm here to tell you the story, so everything's all's well that ends well. So I had 2 jobs, and I never got in trouble, ever. My brother, on the other hand, flunked 6th grade, never had a job, and he was expelled from the bus. And they still got him a shotgun and a waterbed for Christmas. Now that's not fair, colossally unfair. So I'm like, I need a horse. And they were like, you know what? Great argument. Your wish is granted. So I got a horse. I got a horse, and his name was Charlie Brown. Now, people in New York, when they hear this story, they're like, oh, okay, you weren't poor in Texas. You had a horse. You were a privileged girl. I'm like, oh, no. You're thinking like the Hamptons, with steeple ridges and stables and riding crops. No. Think deep woods, Peru, wild jungles of Peru or Mexico or whatever. You get a horse, you tie a rope around its neck, voila. You own a horse. That's it. That's how easy it is. Charlie Brown was there for fertilizer for our garden. He kept the lawn mowed, and he took me to Webb's Grocery to get some Boone's Farm, Strawberry Hill. Now, Charlie Brown was a 2-year-old gelding, and I broke him myself, and he was so sweet, and he was so smart. My mom said he felt like he was one of us, like he was a human, and he followed us around like a little puppy. If I walked, he walked. If I jogged, he trotted. If I ran, he galloped. He was just stuck to me like glue. Okay, maybe not glue. Sorry, Charlie Brown. Velcro. He was stuck to me like Velcro. Oh, sorry, rest in peace. But he was like my little right-hand man. And we spent every waking moment together, it felt like. So when I wanted to give him treats, I would ring this bell, a cowbell, in the shape of a longhorn, and I'd ring it, and he'd come because he knew he got his treats. So one day I went out there and I rang the bell, but Charlie Brown didn't come. That's a little weird. So I rang it louder and I yelled his name, Charlie Brown, come get your treats. Nothing. So I'll call him again. And then that's when I see him on the perimeter of the land. We had about 5 acres fenced in, and he was running along the perimeter, but it was weird, like slow motion. He was like not galloping, not trotting. It was just like he was loping like this. And he was shaking his head and twitching his tail and shaking his skin and kicking up his heels like he had flies around him or something. And I was like, oh God, did he get into a hornet's nest or what's going on? And so I'm screaming about his name, Charlie Brown, get over here, ringing the bell. Finally, I run inside, grab my mom and brother. I said, something wrong with the horse. And they're like, what is it? So we go back out and I said, look, here he comes again. And he, again, just loping and weird and shaking, twitching and kicking up his heels. My mom's like, that is strange. It's like he's stoned or something. That's when my brother takes off running barefoot through the woods, runs around the shed and just lets out a blood-curdling scream. Fuck! And he comes tromping back out. Oh, God, he ate my plants. We're like, what? Plants? My pot. He ate it. He ate it all. It's all gone. He ate it. We're like, oh, my, what? My brother had been growing giant stalks of marijuana, and Charlie Brown had chomped off the tops of each and every one. Charlie Brown was baked. So if you ever want to know what a horse does when they're stoned, apparently they run around in circles and try to shake off imaginary flies. I don't know. But it really does give new meaning to that phrase, get off your high horse. Thank you. That's my story. Thanks, David. Thank you, Jay. Thanks for the Queens Theater. Thank you.
Cambrie Cruz. I love its storytelling shows when I come out of the show with something to Google afterwards, and high horse, literally, like high horse maybe medical, all in parentheses or all in quotation marks. I'll be Googling that one after the show. But don't you Google it now, because we do have some more performers for you. Our next performer, he is a Moth Story Slam winner. He has been on the popular storytelling podcast Story Collider, as well as Dan Savage's podcast Hot Mike. He is also the co-host of Take Two Storytelling, which is a podcast you can listen to on iTunes. It's also a live show at Come On Everybody in Brooklyn. Please welcome our next performer, Alana Lancaster.
So it is the fall of 2009, and I am taking a class on languages in Eastern Europe. And it's that fun day where we learn about music in Eastern Europe. Specifically, the professor's plan for this revolves around Eurovision, which I am very excited about. I love Eurovision. I grew up with Eurovision. There's 2 other people in the class who have any idea what Eurovision is. It's a Europe-wide, plus Israel and maybe sometimes Australia now, it's very confusing, song contest. It's the gayest thing in the history of humanity, although I definitely had no idea about that growing up. In fact, that first dawns on me in this class on languages in Eastern Europe when the professor turns off the lights, turns on the projector, and suddenly I am completely mesmerized and transfixed because on the screen is a Ukrainian drag queen, Verka Serdyuchka, proudly representing her country by singing a song called Dancing Lasha Tumbai. No one knows what those words mean. It doesn't matter. I'm only focused on one thing, which is her costume. She is head to toe in silver lame and other magical materials that are so reflective. She just covers up the entire screen. She's just magnetic and magic. And she's wearing this hat. This hat, it looks like a disco ball is trying to eat her head. And on top of the disco ball trying to eat her head, there is this gigantic silver star just magically staying in place despite it being about as big as the rest of her. The whole net effect is that you could definitely see her from space. And you also know that if you saw her from space, you wouldn't be sure if you were seeing someone's, you know, just very kindly but fashionably eccentric Eastern European grandmother or some kind of drag alien. You wouldn't know, you wouldn't care. She's magic. All I can think is, I want that hat. I mean, also, I just want to be her, but I want that hat. And as I'm mulling this over, this magical experience, after I leave class, I realize I have a way. I can be her, and I can have the hat if I can pull this off. If in the student drag show in the spring, I perform, some might call copy, I could call it an homage, a tribute to Verka Serdyuchka. So I've been involved in the drag show in the past, but I haven't actually like really performed. I wanted to be a drag queen since I knew that that was a thing that people did. To me, they are like the utter epitome of fearless fabulosity. And I am absolutely not fearless, but I want to be. You know, the first year we did the drag show, I emceed it, and the second year I could call it stage managing, but really it was just like kind of benevolent bullying, like running around trying to, I guess that's stage managing sometimes. I was myself. I was walking around in my own clothes, doing my own thing, and what I want now is the escape of a drag adventure. So this year I'm going to do it for real. So I spring into action. The first thing I need to line up is my backup dancers. She has backup dancers. They are, for some inexplicable reason, dressed like soldiers, silver and gold lame soldiers. One of them is playing an accordion. None of it makes sense, and all of it makes sense, and it's perfect. So I need several people to buy into my vision here. So I just bombard everyone I know with this video over and over and over again. My most successful method of this is just lurking in the dank rainbow painted basement that is the Queer Student Union and just playing it over and over again. And my friends eventually, 4 of them, agree. And then we start sourcing our costumes, of course. So it's a particular kind of shopping. You walk into every single thrift store within a drivable radius, and you just let your inner magpie guide you. You just run towards anything that is remotely shiny or reflective. It's a very unique way of shopping. I highly recommend it. Winter break comes, and I send people out all over the country, whether they're performing in the act or not, to try to help me source these materials, and a miracle occurs. And there is a friend of mine in Chicago finds a pair of gold pleather pants that are a perfect match for a gold pleather jacket that we buy in New York. And to me, this is everything I need to know that the drag gods are smiling upon us. We have found favor in their eyes. This is going to be a success. But then we come back for the spring semester and I lose momentum completely. And not just with my shiny hunt. I lose momentum with everything. I am the kind of depressed where I am eating raw ramen because it is less work than putting milk and cereal in a bowl. For the record, I do not recommend this. It is very loud raw ramen. It does not taste very good. And I promise you the texture of ramen is dramatically improved through cooking. Do as I say, not as I do. But that's where I was. I was in that place where you cross the street and you think about jumping in front of a car, or you get on a train and you think about jumping in front of the train, which I personally find puts some damper on my motion through the world. So I don't tell anyone that this is going on. That's the kind of person I am at this point in my life. I just, it doesn't even occur to me that telling people that things are not okay is possible. I just kind of shrug them off and tell them I'm busy. Fortunately, I'm able to get myself to do the things that worked the last time. And so I go back to therapy and I go back on medication and it does work. And I start to poke my head out of the hole, which for me is the most dangerous time because I can see that my life is a mess all around me, but I don't have any energy to do anything about it yet. But in this particular mess, there is a pile of very shiny things, and I seize on that. I throw myself into this because suddenly, within the landscape of my life, impersonating a Ukrainian drag queen seems like the most attainable thing that I can do. So I whip myself into a frenzy. I cover up the fear with this flurry of activity. We are, I am just stripping Eastern Long Island of all of its shiny things. Like, the rhinestones are mine. You think you have tinfoil? Oh no, you don't anymore. It is mine. It has been called into service. Eminent domain for all the shiny things, snatching them all up. The pile is getting bigger. My friends and I are buying stuff at the Army Navy surplus store and spray painting it gold and silver, just in random places that we find where we have enough ventilation for the fumes. Let's see, we find an accordion somehow that someone is willing to let us borrow and I think let us paint it gold. I don't know how we did that, but we did. I still don't know how I'm making the hat. I don't have any training that would help someone do this in, I don't know, millinery or sculpture or architecture or magic. I don't have any of these skills. But what I lack in skill, I have in persistence. So I do things like trying to glue rhinestones to a swim cap, which doesn't fail as spectacularly as you might be imagining, but really, really fails. I try building an entire hat just out of armature wire. Does not work. I bought, I want to say 13. Yeah, I bought 13 different Christmas tree toppers because that seemed like the obvious solution to me. And not a single one of these goddamn 13 Christmas tree toppers works. I can't do it. But finally, I cobbled something together with this wool knit cap that I paint silver and I glue rhinestones to, and I have an armature wire cage within the wool knit cap and wire that comes out through the top, and there's a cardboard star. It's pretty big actually, and it's covered in rhinestones and it's painted silver, and from far away it actually looks pretty good. And, I don't really know how to walk in heels, let alone dance in heels, but I am practicing and I'm listening to the song over and over and over again. It's in English and German and Ukrainian and some gibberish that the drag queen totally claimed was Mongolian, but wasn't. And that actually almost started an international incident when it was performed. Fun fact. So I'm listening to it and I'm memorizing it. I am half-assing the choreography with a lot of I'm finger wagging and step, touch, clap is totally going to carry me through this. I'm just going to be shiny and stand there and it's going to work. And my friends are practicing and it's all coming together. I'm still worried about the structural integrity of the hat. I've tried stress testing it with my choreography, and it's about as good as I'm gonna do when the show arrives. So it's the night of the show, and I step out and I part the tinsel curtain, and I step out onto the rickety stage in my horrible high heels that look like I stole them from someone's grandmother's closet, which is weirdly appropriate. And it works. It's good. there's a moment in the song where she says, "Don't live to dance, dance to live. I love you." And when I say I love you, I lock eyes with someone in the audience and they blush furiously. And that's when I know that I have them. But all I can think about afterwards is that the star fucking fell halfway through the act. I can feel it bouncing on my head, and while it's happening, the adrenaline is carrying me through, but afterwards I am just wallowing in completely absurd, disproportionate, ridiculous upset and shame. Like, we go to a diner afterwards to celebrate, and the waitress is, we're still like all, dirty and rhinestoney in the best possible way, and the waitress is like, "Oh, did you just come from the drag show?" And I'm like, "We were the drag show." And but I'm not actually enjoying myself. I'm stealing my own joy by just obsessing over this silver star that fucking on my fucking head, this flaccid star. I can't stop thinking about it. So the next day, I come to the performance space again to try to get ready for the second day of the show, and I quickly realize a few things. One is that no one else noticed that the star fell or cared. The other is that I don't really care that no one else noticed. I'm still obsessed with it. But what quickly becomes apparent is that my friends who have been willing to come on this whole bizarre adventure with me, they can tell that I'm upset for maybe more reasons than I'm actually saying. But they know me well enough and they love me enough that they're gonna collude in this fiction that it's kind of just about this goddamn hat. So I'm cradling it like it's a dead child, and they take it from my hands. And that's right, of course, they do kind of know how to do things like sculpture and millinery and engineering. And there's this like great montage throughout the day where I keep on seeing it in different people's hands, and different people have like pliers and different kinds of glue, and they're putting rhinestones on and they're taking rhinestones off. And it's like, and by the end of the day, it is completely, it's still recognizable and still recognizably shitty, but it's transformed. It is much, much, much more structurally secure. And I put it on. And sometimes you really do just need one thing to go right in order to remind you that things aren't going to be terrible forever. And the second night of the show, from the first finger wag to the climactic pelvic thrust at the end of the performance, the star stayed up. Thanks. Thank you so much to David and to the Queens Theatre for having us tonight.
Thank you so much, Alana Lancaster. Thank you so much. Oh, my heart was beating as we were assembling that outfit. I was just excited for the next thing, and then we got to rebuild the whole star. That was like a Rocky montage in drag, which I'm sure has been done at a drag show before, the Rocky Balboa themed show. If not, when our venues are all back, someone will get on that. Just this previous June, I had been booked to perform one of my one-man shows at the Phoenicia Fringe Festival in Phoenicia, New York, about 2.5 hours upstate from New York. The show was going to be on a Friday night. And then the next night, the Saturday night, I was booked to perform on a storytelling show at one of my favorite venues in New York City, the Crane Theater. And this storytelling show was an event pick in Time Out New York magazine. My plan was going to go up to Phoenicia, do the show, get up super early Saturday morning, enjoy the countryside a bit, and then take the bus back down, commute out to Astoria, Queens, where I've lived for over a decade now, and then commute into Manhattan to make that evening storytelling show no problem. Then that Friday comes, I go up to Phoenicia, I get there, the theater's gorgeous, it was built in 1887, the staff there is so nice and accommodating, and I'm traveling with my girlfriend, Paige, and Paige and I, they put us up at this Airbnb, just a short walk from the theater. And we get to the Airbnb and we check in, and I see on the fridge at this Airbnb, there's this sheet of paper that has all these things about bears. And I'm like laughing it off. I'm like, what? I'm like taking it, I'm like laughing in silly voices, reading it. And in particular, the one point that I really hammer in making fun of this is the fact that they say at night around this Airbnb, as you're walking down the streets of Phoenicia, New York, you should be clapping as you walk. Like you won't startle a bear or something. Ridiculous. That Friday night, I do the show. I get a pretty good crowd for not knowing anyone in Phoenicia. And it goes really well, feel great about the performance, hang out afterwards, and then Paige and I are walking back to our Airbnb. As we're about to hang a left on the street where our Airbnb is, about 5 feet from us, we see the bushes violently rustling. We hear what sounds like knives being dragged down a board of wood, and we hear a growl that starts low and then gets louder and a little more menacing, because a few feet from us is an angry bear. Paige and I turn on a dime and run back towards the theater. This man who is walking his dog sees us running. He asks us what's wrong. I say, we're in town from New York City. I just did a show at the Phoenicia Fringe Festival, and we got startled by a bear. This guy had every right to be like, oh, little city kid. Oh, you want me to call you an Uber? Maybe you should stress eat some artisanal Chipotle mayo that you bought from some guy with a beard on his roof in Williamsburg, and you'll feel better. But the guy wasn't like that at all. He said to me, it was amazing. He said, look, I've lived in Phoenicia for decades. I still get startled by the bears. He tells us best thing to do is just walk the other way, walk the long way back to our place. And a few hours after joking about it, there I am, walking back to our place. And what am I doing with Paige right next to me doing the same thing? Walking while clapping. We hang a right this time to get back onto that street. We are about 20 feet from entering our Airbnb when what do I hear in the yard next to this place? Knives on wood sound and the low growling getting louder. Paige and I book it for the Airbnb door, and I unlock it, and I close it behind us, and I lock it. I lock it because bears, notorious thieves and pickpockets who can apparently crack a lock, I guess. And I'm totally hyperventilating. I am super panicking. Paige is significantly less panicking. That's how our relationship works. And I know the thing that I need to do to bring my panic level down, I need to lie down, I need to grab my phone, I need to go on Wikipedia and read every article on lethal bear attacks. And that's what I do. It's how my psychology works, I guess, and it does put my panic at ease. I sleep well, get up the next morning in Phoenicia. We walk around town. We have great pancakes at a diner. Then we meet some donkeys. We get on the bus back to New York City, get back to Manhattan, commute home to Astoria, Queens, have dinner, settle in, and then head out to that Saturday night show at the Crane Theater. Now, we get to Steinway Street to get to the R train, and we see the train there on the platform. We run down the steps. We get in, expecting the doors to close. We just made it. But the doors don't close. We hear that bing on the speakers. And I've lived in New York City for 12 years, and I've never quite heard this announcement, which was, ladies and gentlemen, there are delays in almost every single train on the New York City subway system due to a massive power outage on the west side of Manhattan. I'm like, there's no way we're making this show if we stay on this train, and I got some bus smarts, folks. So does Paige. We leave, we go above ground. We get on the Q101. Q101 goes across the Queensboro Bridge, gets us to the M15 on First Avenue. We go down First Avenue to East 4th Street, pop out and get to the Crane Theater on time in the middle of this blackout. I get to the theater and I was so excited for the show because being on event pick in Time Out New York usually means you're going to get a really, really great, big, enthusiastic crowd. And due to those subway delays, there was hardly anybody there. But I got on stage and I did my 10 minutes and it went over really well with the folks who were there, and all the other acts also went over really well, and it was still a good show for the folks who were there. And I got out of the Crane and the subway was still not working. So Paige and I got on the M15, and then we went to Queensboro Bridge to catch the Q101. But this time there was a huge crowd at the Q1. It was like the hottest club on the Upper East Side. So many people wanted to get this bus back to Queens. So we all had to wait, this huge crowd at the Q101 bus stop. And there's this man working the door of a strip club right near that bus stop. And he has a captive audience. And he says to all of us, "My strip club still has power, folks. And you want to know why? It's because there's a full moon tonight. And the location of this club is perfect to harness those moonbeams. And that's why my strip club has power tonight." And I was like, I love New York, man. We get on the Q101. We ride back to Queens. I get in bed, lying in there, and I think, wow, in the last 24 hours, I had to deal with a near bear attack in the countryside and a blackout in the big city. And I had to do shows in the midst of all those things, and the shows went pretty well. And last thought I had before I fell asleep was, well, I guess you can book me anywhere. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you. All right. Our next performer at Queens Storytellers Online tonight is the host of the podcast, Half White Son of a Black Man. He recently appeared on the CW's TV show Mysteries Decoded. He is a frequent writer and performer with the Random Access Theater, which is a company that takes pop culture stories and Shakespearean text and fuses those together. He's actually responsible for one of their hit shows, which took Ghostbusters and Shakespeare, and it was called The Merry Busters of Ghosts. Our next performer, please welcome Andrew Sanford.
Hi. Hello. Thank you, David. Thank you to Queens Theatre. This is a lot of fun. I've been loving the story so far, so let's keep that momentum going. So, as David mentioned, I am a writer and performer, and I've lived in New York City for a little over 10 years, and I've gotten the opportunity to do some really cool things in that time. I work with this theater company that I love. I host a podcast that I've hosted for almost 6 years, and I got to go chase Bigfoot in the mountains of British Columbia, and that's a real thing, and it's on the CW. But none of that pays the bills. It just doesn't. So for the majority of that time, I have made my living as a Broadway bartender. And in this time when all Broadway theaters are closed, I kind of miss it. It's not always the greatest. I am the guy who, puts your drinks into sippy cups. I was actually doing that job when sippy cups first became a thing at most of the Broadway theaters. And spoiler alert, customers really don't care for change. All right, as you might guess, people were mad about that. They were angry. They would bring a rock to Subway angry, but they were mad. They were not happy with getting their drinks in sippy cups. And customers at Broadway theaters would be notorious for being, I would say, rude. I had a gentleman once stare me in the eyes after I sold him a beer and say, I'm not going to tip you, right? A woman once said to me, "Oh, it's like you're raping me," after I told her the price of her bottled water that she was voluntarily paying for. One time, a celebrity, a very well-known actor, gave a really hard time about the price of Maker's Mark. Me, who was dressed like 80 other people in the building, clearly not in charge of those decisions, but his rant held up my line at intermission for pretty much its duration. I won't say who it was. I'll just say that I had just saw them in Boyhood, so I think they just needed to vent. While I had some really difficult times doing that job, I've had some really great times too. I met some wonderful people. I met David doing that job. I met my wife doing that job, and every now and then I meet a customer that doing that work that kind of brings this confluence of working in New York and career aspirations together. I used to do stand-up comedy, and I loved doing stand-up comedy. I had to give it a shot. I love making people laugh, but it turns out that I just didn't love doing stand-up enough. Like, I would see other comedians that would, do 5 or 6 mics in one night and then just do the next thing the next night and do that 5 nights a week, 5 or 6 mics. And I was more of just like, I'll do like one microphone show on one night, have like 5 or 6 beers, and do it again the next Tuesday. I never thought like, oh, maybe I could be a famous stand-up comedian. It was always, maybe if I do enough stand-up, I'll get to write Batman at some point. So it wasn't, I had to move on. But before I did, I had a really, really terrible, awful show. So I used to do this show, one of my favorites, called The Tuesday Show, that some friends of mine ran, a co-hosting duo. We performed it at the Ha Comedy Club, which is in the middle of Times Square. Okay, and Ha was this big, gaudy comedy club, and in the room that we performed, they did karaoke immediately afterwards. So you could do your topical jokes, and then you could sing your drunken covers of My Prerogative by Bobby Brown, which is my go-to most of the time. And I love doing that show. We had a mix of established comedians and people who were friends of the show who just liked telling their jokes once a week. It was a lot of fun. But one Tuesday, we come to do the show, and Ha had booked another event in the room without telling us, a quinceañera, in fact, like most comedy clubs. Hosts were a little mad, understandably so. Ha was just like, listen, we'll offer you a compromise. Your show isn't paid for. People were allowed to come for free. So you can perform in front of this paying audience, and we won't pay you, but you can still do your show, or you don't do it and you go home and we'll see you next week. One of the hosts was upset by this and left. I don't blame him. The other host was like, you know what? People are here. The show must go on. Let's go perform for this. And things from there. We get into the room, and this is a room that is more like road. If you don't know what a road dog is, like a comedian who's able to work any room they're in. They work the crowd, drunk people to just go wherever you need them to be on the road. Or we were not that kind of show, and the host. So with one of gone, the bits didn't really work. So the host had to go up and try to come up with bits on the spot that weren't really played to this crowd. And I watched comedian after comedian go up there and just flounder to absolute silence. And I was like, nah, I'm going to be different. My jokes are going to save me in this instance. I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to walk out to silence. And I was kind of wrong. I get up there, and almost immediately I noticed how poorly lit the room is. Not like poorly lit as in too dark, poorly lit as in like I can clearly see every single person in the room, of which there were 8 or 9, big night for us. I could see them. I could see the color of their eyes. So I'm standing up there, and immediately my jokes are just falling flat. Even my opener / go at the time that usually got me out of trouble, which was a sexual assault joke that these days really just makes me cringe, but I swear just killed in 2010 for some reason. Nothing. Fell flat. Another joke that I have, I try to go to at the time, another one I'm not too proud of, involves me saying, hey, it's my birthday today, and people usually go, oh, happy birthday, and I go, nah, just kidding. It's not my birthday, but it feels like my birthday because I got this fat kid fall down on the sidewalk today. That's the joke. Again, really top level. I'm up there on stage, and I say, it's my birthday. And somebody goes, who cares? And again, I can see him. And it's not even like he's proud of himself for heckling me. He sees genuinely curious why I would announce that it was my birthday, and kind of just mad that I did. So I finish my set, I walk off, again, not to complete silence. I did get one person responding, and I drown my sorrows in some Heineken. I do a cover of Humpty Dance, and then I go home pretty sure that I am never going to do stand-up comedy ever again. A few nights later, I'm at the Imperial Theater, and already it feels weird walking in there because when you're a Broadway bonder, you walk through the same stage door that the actors go through, except they go right and make their dreams come true in front of a whole audience of people, and you go left and sell very overpriced sodas pretty much parallel from them and watch it all happen. And I'm working And this couple comes up to the bar, and they are immaculately dressed. Okay, they are the gentleman is in a tux, like a James Bond tux, and the woman is in the sleek black dress with diamond accented trim on the top. Like, they looked amazing. Her hair was done. And it was weird for a couple of reasons. This was not opening night of the show, which I think was nice work if you can get it, because New York is just full of coincidences. And I'm lucky if Broadway customers don't wear Crocs and shorts to the theater most of the time. And they were my age, maybe a little older. Like, I was 20 at the time. These guys were maybe 23, 25 max. And they were polite. They laughed. They joked around with me. They tipped. It was amazing. And at one point, the woman says, dead serious, kind of stops everything and says, "Are you a comedian?" And this completely took me back. I think I said something along the lines of just like, "Oh yeah, no, I'm working behind the bar, telling jokes." And she's like, "No. Like, do you do anything like that?" And I said, "Well, yeah, actually I do." And she said, "I saw you in a couple of weeks ago that my friend was in. You were really funny." And this completely caught. I had to think for a second. I was like, she said a few weeks ago, so I was pretty sure she wasn't lying, because she didn't say a couple nights ago. But before I could really say anything else, they were gone. That was it. She just dropped that in my lap and went about with their night. I would only end up doing stand-up for another 2 years, maybe. But if it wasn't for that customer that I met doing my shitty day job, it might have only been a couple more nights. So it's things like that when New York and your career kind of comes into this perfect kind of swivel. Mix and anything, I don't know what I'm doing with my hands. It all works, and it makes me miss that. I don't miss sippy cups, but I miss that. So thank you, you guys. Thank you so much.
Andrew Sanford. Oh, goodness. Yes. I did work at that job with Andrew, and I've had a lot of folks be like, this time must be hard, and it is hard. And I've had some folks be like, it must be hard having to only do these shows online. And that's when I say, well, no, because like I've bombed opening for karaoke, and then the next night sold a martini to a angry tourist at a jukebox musical starring someone who was famous 30 years ago. So yeah, Andrew, I think we can take the toughness right now, man. I think so. Before we get to our final performer at this our cycle finale of Queens Storytellers Online, I just want to thank Dominic D'Andrea and our stage manager Jay Rogers and Taryn Sacramore at the Queens Theater, the executive director there. Taryn, Jay, and Dominic, thank you all so much for bringing me on board to do this. These shows have been great to do. Every single time when I click leave meeting when this is over, I feel like I just did a show for great New Yorkers at a great New York venue, and that's meant so much to me, and I hope that's been infectious for you folks at home, that you think you've been watching a great New York show at a great New York venue with great New York performers. All that being said, our final act for Queens Storytellers Online tonight. She is a company member of one of my favorite theater companies in New York City, the New York Neo-Futurists. She hosts her storytelling podcast, Tell the Bartender, as well as co-hosting an advice podcast, The Struggle Bus. Their most recent episode is called Pandemic Haircuts. Please welcome our final performer tonight, Katharine Heller.
Hello. Thank you so much. All right, so a little under 15 years ago, I went through my first very serious breakup, the kind where you live with someone for the first time and you love them very much, but it's very painful. And I proceeded to go on what I like to call the stroll. The stroll, for those who don't know, is when you go through your to-do list sexually. You know all the people you like wanted to fuck when you're in a monogamous relationship? And you have some meaningless sex. Now, luckily, because I was a bartender at the time in Brooklyn, my to-do list proceeded to be pretty much anyone within a 1-block radius of the bar, including my coworkers. So, that was fun. I was having some, they say, to get over someone, get under someone, womp womp. And it was a fun spring. Spring turns to summer. Next thing you know, it's June. And one of my dear friends from high school, I grew up in New York, is marrying a Scottish man, and the wedding is in Glasgow. So I go to Glasgow for this wedding. All of us New York Bronx Science girls go with the wedding party, who is all of his hot Glaswegian, Scottish, and British friends. I am ready. I get to the airplane, I get on, and because I'm flying Aer Lingus, I look at the plane seat in front of me, and all the seats were covered up with this poem in Gaelic. And this one line translated, this poem translated to this line, "Kiss me specially." I don't speak Gaelic, but it was translated underneath the seat. And I thought about that, and I sat there and stared at it. Kiss me specially. That's the one thing I hadn't had happen to me. I mean, I was having all this meaningless fun sex because back then there was no Netflix, but it was something that it just kind of hit me in my gut. I've not been kissed like that, not specially. So the Xanax kicked in. I woke up in Glasgow, and my friend Corey picked me up at the airport. She's also a New York friend, and we go to the wedding. Now, the wedding is going to take place this entire weekend at a 16th century castle that was turned into a youth hostel. They rented, the wedding party rented this entire castle for the weekend. So Corey and I were like high-fiving, like, yeah, it's on. We get there immediately. Corey and I were the only single friends amongst our high school friends at this wedding. Immediately we glom onto these two hot dudes from London, Cameron and JJ. Corey zeroes in on Cameron because he's the hotter of the two. Cameron zeroes in on Corey because she's the hotter of us two. So I was stuck with JJ, who was totally hot as well. So the night before the wedding, we're having some drinks and we're on this, like, the grounds of this castle, and there's sheep because, like, that's a thing in Glasgow. They just roam the streets. And I'm getting to know JJ. He's super hot. Corey and Cameron are already getting it on. And at one point I asked him, like, oh, what does JJ stand for? And he was like, Jesse Jackson. And I was like, I have to fuck you just for narrative value alone. Here we are. So anyway, the night goes on. We have a good time. The next day is the wedding. It's gorgeous. We're on the grounds of this beautiful castle. We're all making friends, drinking a lot of scotch. And then finally, it is the party after the wedding. We are tearing it up. The boys from Scotland and London taught us how to Highland dance. The girls from New York taught them how to do the electric slide. It was incredible. We're taking Polaroids. We're having a blast. We're drinking. We're dancing. And me and JJ just start dancing some more and dancing some more. Now, the thing about Glasgow in June is that the sun sets at 11 p.m. and rises at 3 a.m. So no matter how drunk you are, spoiler, a lot, time shifts a little bit. You think pandemic brain's bad? It's similar to that. You're like, where am I? So anyway, the sun starts to come up, but the dance party's still happening. It was in this beautiful ballroom in this castle with this gigantic scope of these, like, circular windows, like almost church-like, beautiful, absolutely gorgeous. So he takes my hand right as the sun starts to rise, and he takes me outside. And I was like, yes. And he takes me out to the grounds of this beautiful castle and sits me on this stone sort of wall. There's sheep baaing behind us. The sun is rising. You can smell lanolin because of the sheep. There's fog coming up, mist coming up from the grass, even though it hadn't rained. Who knows? It's a magical place. And he takes my hand and he looks at me and says, I'm not going to do the accent because I can't. He says, Katharine, there's something I want you to know. And I was like, go on. And he said, I really like you, but I met someone 2 weeks ago. And I feel if anything were to happen between us, it'd be like I was cheating on her. And I was like, they still make them like you? And it was really beautiful. And I had a moment, I said, thank you so much for telling me that. That's really sweet. And at that exact moment, I'd never felt more respected in my entire life, and respected knowing that he respected someone else. And he leaned in and gave me the most beautiful light kiss on my lips. I can still feel it. It was the first time I'd been kissed specially in a really long time. And then I said, can I at least suck your dick? And he was like, yes. So we go around the back of the castle, do the thing. It was great. He walked me back to my room like a gentleman. It was really beautiful, but it just sort of like reminded me of, you know, when you feel a chapter page turn in your life and you're like, yes, I want that. I want that. I want JJ, but not that JJ. I want my own JJ, right? So I woke up the next morning, we said our goodbyes, exchanged emails, never spoke again. And I actually did end up getting into a very long-term relationship with an amazing person after that. I kind of like stepped up my game. We're not together anymore, this guy and I. We were together for a long time, and I don't regret a thing. It was wonderful. But the moral of this beautiful story is that when you're giving a blowjob behind a 16th century castle, make sure you don't accidentally do it right outside the window where the entire wedding party on the dance floor is watching, because you'll never live it down anytime you have to go to a party with them, especially their anniversary. And you know what? I'm okay with that. That's the moral. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I do have a photo here, if you're interested. I've not shown this to anyone. This is a Polaroid of me and JJ on the dance floor. And yes, there is a tie around his head because a lot of scotch was involved. And that's me taking my belt off to tie it around my head for this here photo. This is about an hour right before we hooked up. So yeah, that is, I hope they're not watching, and that's my story.
Katharine Heller.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Goodness gracious. We had when we were all trying to get that tech figured out, it was actually Katharine who came up with the great idea of, yes, donating to her Venmo, but just like bilking donations to Queens Theatre to get the moral of the story there. Okay, folks, thank you so much to everyone who performed tonight, and thank you so much for dealing with us through a few technical difficulties. But like we have every single week for these past 4 weeks here at Queens Storytellers Online, we're going to do a little virtual theater curtain call. This time around, though, folks, if you haven't yet, hit one of those react buttons. Well, not one of those, preferably the heart button or the laugh button or a mere like, if you will, or the little the thing holding the suffocating a heart. I don't know what that one's all about, but you can hit that one too as we do our Queen Storytellers Online curtain call. So bringing back up to the virtual stage, please welcome Cambrie Cruz. Oh, Alana Lancaster there and Cambrie Cruz. Terrific. And Andrew Sanford. And Katharine Heller. And folks, I have been your host, David Lawson. This has been Queens Storytellers Online. This is the series finale for this cycle. Queens Theatre at Home is going to be continuing with all kinds of great content like the show you just watched tonight. So thank you so much again to Jay, to Dominic, to Taryn, to Cambrie, to Katharine, to Alana, to Andrew, and thank you most of all for watching tonight. Good night, folks. Thank you.